Good evening. Could I have your attention, please? Good evening. Thank you all for attending our work session tonight. We are here to discuss a pending oil and gas drilling permit for a piece of land at the very south end of Superior near McCaslin and Highway 128. Realize that we are at capacity in this room. We considered moving to a larger venue, but we do not have the options. And if we did, we wouldn't have been able to record this meeting and live stream it, which is very important. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, so if you do not have a seat, you can view it remotely on a mobile device or at a later time. This is a unique meeting because we are in between an election and the certification of the election results. I want to welcome our 3 new board members who have not been formally seated, but definitely wanted them to be a part of this important meeting. Laura Skwajinsky, Ken Lish, and Anil Shah. Now, many of you are probably wondering, where does the mayor and the board stand on this issue? Speaking for myself, and I believe every board member and incoming board member, we are absolutely 100% opposed to oil and gas drilling in Superior. We are going to turn over every stone, investigate every angle, and do everything in our power to make sure it does not happen. You elected us to represent your interests, protect your family's health, safety, and property values, and that's what we're going to do. The town staff and individual board members and incoming board members have all been busy ever since this was announced, researching, spreading the word, advocating, and we're going to continue doing so until this is resolved. What we're doing here this evening is here to share what we know, ask questions of our experts about our options, and hopefully conclude with some action items that we can carry forward with in the coming weeks and days. The amount of community advocacy we've seen here from concerned residents is appreciated, and it's impressive and appreciated, and we want to thank you for your concerns. Because this is a work session, this will be a discussion only. There will not be any decisions made or votes taken during the meeting. We're going to start with an update from our town manager, and then we're going to hear from 3 other guests who all have a significant expertise in the area of oil and gas. Mayor Randy Ahrens, the City and County of Broomfield, is here this evening. Thank you, Mayor, for attending. We got Jason Grubb, Community Outreach Coordinator with Colorado Oil and Gas Association, is here to share his expertise. And we have Attorney Matt Sura, attorney with Ireland Stapleton, is here as well. These individuals are here to provide us with information and options. They're not here to advocate for oil and gas development. The format for this evening, I would like each of our speakers to give a short 5-minute or so introduction and summary, and then we will follow with questions from our board members to any of those 4 individuals. I know it's going to be tempting to ask questions as they're going along, but I really would like to stick to that format if we could, just to be respectful of all the information they have to share, and then we will have questions and answers from our board members to those experts. And I think all of that will provide all of us, audience and the board, with a lot of information that we're all seeking here tonight. Our PROSTAC committee is scheduled to meet here in this boardroom at 7 p.m., and I have a hunch that we may not be done. So we're going to offer the space in the conference room next door to our PROSTAC members if they would like to meet there at 7 p.m. I imagine a lot of them are in this room and would like to hear this discussion as well. So our chairperson of PROSTAC will make the final call on that. Now, depending on time, we'll do our best to offer an opportunity for public comment. Realize many of you have got opinions on this matter, and we'd love to hear from everyone if we can, but it's probably not going to be possible. But if we do not have the opportunity to hear from you personally, please follow up with an email. We do get them, we do read them, and they are very important to us. So please do continue emailing. We've already received a number of them, and we'll continue to read them. So that is it for my introduction. I'll turn it over to Town Manager Matt Magley.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thanks for everybody coming tonight. I repeat the Mayor's comments about the limits of the room. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry everybody doesn't have a seat, but it's just the way it is, so I'm sorry. So Highlands National Resources has submitted permit applications with the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, COGCC. to drill and well pad sites for the Rocky Flats Refuge Site. One of those locations is in Superior. It's at our northeast corner of Highway 128 and McCaslin Boulevard. Let's see if I can pull it up here on the screen. This is the location here. This is,
Excuse me, could you speak in your mic?
yeah. Yeah, the
Thank you.
cable tech will pull that up. So this is McCaslin, this is Highway 128 here, and this is the site. It's a CenturyLink property. It's about 72 acres, which most of that property is to the east of where they're proposing to put this well location. I met with the staff from the COGCC last week to discuss this application and to get information on the process. They have a public comment period for this site. I've asked the staff of COGCC to extend that public comment period, which they granted. So the public comment period now extends to December 5th. You can get a link to that from the town website if you want to make public comments. Something to note is we've been told that if you submit your comments, it may take 24 hours for those to show up on the website. So if you submitted them this weekend, or if you submitted them today, which is a holiday, it may not show up until Tuesday. I've also reached out to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment last week. There's a consultation process that we can ask them to help us with. They have granted us that consultation process, and it's started. It's a 40-day process that we work with them to express our concerns for the site, and then they work with the COGCC on the site and the application. We'll be working with Matt and Tim Gablehouse, who's our expert attorney on the Rocky Flats site, to put together formal comments that we're going to submit to COGCC and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment for the site. There's a number of concerns that the town has with regard to the site. One of the biggest concerns we have is we have a 500,000 gallon water storage tank that is located approximately right here that is buried in the ground. So that's one of the comments that we're going to be working with them on. If for some reason the COGCC were to approve this site, the town has 10 days to submit a formal protest, which we would obviously do, and then that process would start for the COGCC commission to consider our protest. So that's the update we have as far as what staff has been working on. The board will be talking about doing some other action items possibly this week with regard to this site. And then over the next process, December 5th is the close of the public comment period. So we'll be working to submit our formal comments by then. And with that, I'll turn over to Matt. He's got a presentation. He's going to provide some additional background with regard to the process for well applications and some other background information that I think will be helpful to the public and to the town board as well. Yeah. Sorry, we're folding this back.
Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for having me. My name is Matt Sura. I'm an attorney, oil and gas attorney.
Can you get a microphone, please, so everybody can hear? Thank you.
Again, thank you for having me. Thanks for coming out tonight. Is this better? Yes. Yeah. My name is Matt Sura. I'm an oil and gas attorney, one of about 3 or 4 oil and gas attorneys in the state of Colorado that doesn't work for the oil and gas industry. I do work primarily for nonprofit organizations, neighborhoods, landowners, and local governments. So I've got a brief presentation, but it's not 5 minutes brief. It might be more than that, so I apologize, and you can tell me to stop at any time. The outline of the presentation that I wanted to give was oil and gas development impacts, what the state permitting process looks like, what we know about the proposed development in Superior, certainly your questions, and then potential next steps. And it sounds like that's where we're heading. I worked a lot in the Piceance Basin when I was working for a nonprofit organization, Western Colorado Congress, and then came to law school, and the oil and gas industry followed me over here, and I've been working since the boom of 2008. And that's what our front range looks like. Every one of these red dots is an oil and gas well, one or more oil and gas locations. Many of those are plugged and abandoned, frankly, but we have, at the present time, 53,000 active oil and gas wells. About 3/4 of those are in the front range. Maybe 30,000 of them on the front range. Oil and gas development is a highly industrialized activity, and it's not the oil and gas wells of your fathers or your grandfathers where there's the lonely pump jack. It's more like this. It's multi-well, it's hydraulic fracturing, and it looks a lot more like an industrial complex or a refinery than it does an oil and gas well. Every one of these tanks, there's 24 tanks here, there's 24 separators and emission control units. This is something that's located just outside of Berthoud. This is 24 wells. The one that's proposed within the city limits of Superior is 31 wells. So certainly there are impacts to oil and gas development. There's a sound wall here. Obviously noise is a concern. Nuisance impacts. This guy had a great view at one point until the sound wall came. Sound wall surrounding this on 3 sides. This poor woman is really impacted. In Greeley, noises are going to be a real concern, and it is something that there are mitigation measures that the oil and gas industry can employ to help mitigate some of that noise. But it's an industrial activity, and the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission allows them to emit industrial level noise. Water quality is a concern. There's a lot of spills with the oil and gas industry. That is primarily the concern around water quality is the spills from, and there's hydraulic fracking, hydraulic fracturing fluid can be spilled, and that is not something that you want to drink. There's groundwater methane that is found in relationship to oil and gas development, and this is a study that came through the University of Colorado. But this is how methane ends up in water. It's essentially, you've got, this is the way that it's supposed to work, where you have the oil and gas that's staying within the pipeline. And the well casing is what it's called. And they've got this shallow producing zone that they're not trying to produce, and so they have to have adequate cement outside of the casing and into the borehole to make sure that that doesn't produce. But if you have enough pressure or the cement is poured incorrectly, then the shallow producing zone can cause channelization. Those channels can then end up getting into the Braden Head and then into the freshwater aquifer zone. This has happened more than 60 times on the Front Range alone, where someone's water well was contaminated with methane. That's not a concern here. I understand that you don't have water wells, but that is a concern generally. Impacts to air quality and health is something that we're all concerned about. There are local impacts, regional impacts, and global. I want to just touch quickly on the local impacts, dust and emissions from heavy traffic. You've got diesel fumes. You've got a lot of these different equipments that I mentioned, including compressor engines, tanks, and in one location you can have many different emission sources, tanks, emission control units in this case, that are all contributing to volatile organic compounds being emitted into the area. With those volatile organic compounds comes all the things that are part of the oil and gas development, including benzene, which is a carcinogen. Ground level ozone is also a concern, and we're in a non-attainment area. It's not getting any better. In fact, this last summer was much, much worse than it has been in the past. And volatile organic compounds, VOCs, from the oil and gas industry primarily, combined with transportation, our exhaust, and heat to get the ground level ozone, or O3. Again, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment has estimated that at this point, 60 to 70% of the volatile organic compounds that are leading to the problem that we have with ozone on the Front Range are coming from the oil and gas industry. And of that, most of them are coming from tanks. There are 62 tanks being proposed on this location. This is the ozone non-attainment area, and we're smack dab in the middle of it. Increased public safety risk, of course there is. This is oil and gas development, and it's flammable, as we all know. There's a blowout in Windsor in 2013, and a similar one that happened in February 2017. This is when there was hydraulic fracturing. They're going down a whole mile beneath the surface. They turn that drill bit and they go out 1 to 2 to even 3 miles. And then they hydraulically fracture it, meaning that they're pumping down under extreme pressures. This, what it is more like a slurry. It's in the form of hydraulic fracking fluid that is almost gelatin because it's carrying sand with it. And they pump it at such high pressures that it's able to fracture that formation in many different stages, and leaving behind some little bits of proppant or sand to keep some of those fractures open. When it's coming back is a kind of a dangerous time in the oil and gas development process. That's called the flowback. And this is when we had an accident in Windsor and a similar accident in Hudson. When that flowback is coming up, it's coming up at extreme pressures as well. If there's a break in that line, it's sometimes uncontrollable. You have a tank explosion in Greeley in 2014, 2015, the Firestone tragedy, 2017, and just last week, I guess it's a week ago, a little more than a week ago, the Noble Energy site near Platteville, where you had, again, this was during the hydraulic fracturing process, where the equipment caught fire. Colorado Gas Conservation Commission, which is the state agency that really has the authority over siting these locations under current state law. They have setbacks, minimum setbacks that have to be met, and it is a 1,000-foot setback from schools and hospitals, and a 500-foot setback from homes, generally. And that's it. And that doesn't matter if it's one well or if it's 40 wells, or in this case, 31 wells. It's still the same 500-foot setback.
It's actually from the building, right? Not the edge of the property.
That's from the building. That's right. And it's actually not from the edge of the well pad, but it's the actual facility itself. So the wellhead or the tank or the emission control unit, any one of those production facilities, that's where the setback is measured from. So Superior has the authority to regulate under their land use authority, their general police powers, and under air quality regulations to go beyond what the state requires. However, there's this preemption issue that I know that a lot of you are familiar with, because a lot of our local governments in the state of Colorado have been sued successfully by the oil and gas industry, and in one case, our state government, over whether or not local governments have the ability to say no to oil and gas development. And what our state Supreme Court has said is, undeniably, you do not have the ability to say no. You can't ban it. You can't ban oil and gas development. And so we're stuck in this conundrum where the state has these really lax regulations on one hand, and local governments are not able to say no outright, although there are certainly a lot they can do through their own land use regulations to put forward protections, and in some cases, possibly, if there's some overriding local government justification, to potentially say no. And that is something that has never been challenged and has never been tested through the Colorado courts. Moving into the proposal. This is the original proposal that came on the scene just before the elections. And again, the oil and gas industry was really open about the fact that they were putting forward these applications because they were concerned about Proposition 112 that potentially could have limited oil and gas development on the Front Range. As we know, Proposition 112 that would have required a 2,500-foot setback did not pass, and once it didn't pass, they took this one and this one that was going under Stanley Lake off, and we're left with these 3 locations, 2 on Highway 93 and the one that is in the corner of Superior here off of 128th. So what are you looking at here? Again, what you're seeing is what's called a kick-out in the industry, where they're kicking out or doing directional wells, in this case, 1 to 2 miles, and then they get into the formation that they want to be in, which is going to be either the Codell or the Niobrara formation. These are about 8,000 feet below the surface, so much more than a mile. And then they're going 2 miles out into what we know as Rocky Flats. What's interesting about this one in particular is that they're talking about going 2 miles out in a kick out and then going 3 miles horizontally. And what I can tell you is that this is impossible. It's just not physically possible to do that at current technologies. It's never been done. I've had people in the industry say that it's impossible to go beyond 3.5 miles. This is going 5 miles. And so what this might be is just the industry saying, we want to put down some proposals to make sure that we're on notice, or the state's on notice, that we can do this, and eventually they'll find another location in this area probably to access these, or I suppose they could access it over in Section 18 over to the east. Again, that's what it looks like. And we've already seen this picture. We're looking at 31 wells, 62 tanks. 31 of those tanks are for oil, 31 are for water. They've got 31 separators that they're proposing and 16 emission control units. The typical process for a state approval is that they go and get a drilling and spacing unit first. And this would be a drilling and spacing unit in this case, where it would be these 2 square miles would be 1 drilling and spacing unit. These 2 square miles are 1 drilling and spacing unit. They typically do it with square miles. Then they get a Form A, Form 2A, it's called a location assessment, and that's really what they're doing to the surface, and that's really what we're most concerned about because that's where we live. And that's what local governments have some jurisdiction over, is the surface impacts. And then the Form 2s are applications for permit to drill. That's more what's happening downhole, and not something that you can certainly comment on those, but it's not going to be as easy to comment on because the comments that you would have to put forward are those relating to the geology and their drilling practices, and probably not something that you have a lot of experience in. Where you do have is a lot of experience with noise, with industrial traffic, and the types of things that are happening that are discussed and can be addressed in this Form 2A. So already has been mentioned, you have 20 days for public comment. That has been extended by an additional 10 days from the local government designee, and the local government designee can require the CDPHE, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment consultation, and that has also happened. And then again, local government or a surface owner can request the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission hearing on a location. And this is interesting because both the local government and the surface owner can request to the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission a hearing. This is almost never happens, where a local government says, you know what, we're opposed to this, and we have a hearing because we think that your regulations aren't going to be adequate to protect public health, safety, and welfare, or there's something about this location, like maybe there's plutonium in the area, that is very specific that, you know, your regulations couldn't have contemplated. And so I think that this is exactly appropriate for going to the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission and asking for a hearing on this application. Also, the surface owner has standing to request a hearing on these applications. And my understanding is that, at least according to the application that I read, they are asking to bond on, meaning that they don't have a surface use agreement with the surface owner. They are going to be posting, wait for it, $3,000 bond so they can put an oil and gas location on this property owner's property without their permission. And the law allows for this because the surface owner, in this case, does not own or control the oil and gas mineral rights beneath their surface, and the law allows them to access that surface with or without the surface owner's consent. A lot of problems with oil and gas law in this state. And that's what's gotten us here to this point and this terrible proposal. So the Superior Code allows oil and gas drilling accessory equipment and storage tanks in agricultural and open space districts through special review. And then there's these, if the material endangers the public health or safety, injures the value of adjoining or buffer, value of adjoining or abutting property, if it's not in harmony with the area, if the impact surrounding properties or the town in general are not adequately mitigated, if it results in an adverse environmental impact, or if in general it's not in conformity with the land use in the area, it can be rejected. And I could say that you've got 6 strikes against you here with the current code. There's a lot of open questions. Is a federal permit required for drilling under a Superfund site? This is not an area that I've ever practiced. Is there plutonium on the property that's being proposed for oil and gas development? We all know that plutonium had to be taken care of, or at least checked for, on the site that was actually the Superfund site. But this is just off the Superfund site and possibly does have some plutonium there that could be and would have to be disturbed if they're going to put a well pad there. And then the landowner, which may not be level 3 communications, I don't know if they've granted a surface use agreement at this point or not, but we would certainly want to work with them if they haven't, because they would be a great ally to oppose this.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I know we have many questions, but let's hold those questions. We've got 2 more guests to go ahead with. Jason, you want to go ahead? Thank you.
Can I speak here?
Yes, please.
Can everyone hear me okay? Is this microphone on?
Yes.
No? Does it need to be on?
Check the button. There may be a button to turn it on.
Where am I looking? Is it?
Okay, just
It is on. Do I
just
need to
speak right
closer?
into it.
Is that better?
Just speak
Okay.
right into
Great.
it. It's very close.
Excellent. Well, my name is Jason Grubb. I'm with the Colorado Oil and Gas Association, more commonly known as COGA. Our address is at 1800 Glenarm. I don't know if y'all need that for your records. Mayor, the Board of Trustees, staff, I appreciate you having me come and speak. COGA, for those of you that don't know, we're a 501c6 nonprofit trade association. We essentially represent Colorado's oil and gas industry, top to bottom, what we call upstream to downstream. So everyone like the big entities that you may be familiar with, like, Noble Energy, ConocoPhillips, down to small, what we may classify as mom and pop, outfits, maybe a small accounting firm or engineering firm, something like that. The entire value chain of oil and gas here in Colorado. The specific operator that has this proposal in front of Superior and other parts of the state, they're not a member of ours. And so regardless of that fact, honestly, we don't speak to the specific goings-on of individual companies' operations. We do speak on behalf of and advocate for the industry as a whole throughout the state. And so my purpose for being here tonight is predominantly just to introduce myself and COGA as a resource for for our elected officials, for staff, for concerned residents, to the extent that you have questions regarding technical aspects of oil and gas development here in Colorado, the regulatory framework by which the industry is governed here in the state. We would like to be a resource for you all. This is an industry that is incredibly complicated, nuanced, very technical. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and my goal and the role of KOGA is just to ensure that you all have the best information possible to make good decisions. I don't, have a background in oil and gas development. I spent the better part of the last decade doing public lands conservation for a national nonprofit based out of Boulder. I'm fairly new to this role at KOGA. I'm about a year in, something like that. But I can tell you that I've been incredibly impressed with how oil and gas development is done here in the state of Colorado. The regulations here are the strictest across the country. Honestly, I don't know that I could do this job in maybe another state that had less stringent regulations. I'm very proud of the work that we do here in the state of Colorado. And that's really the purpose of me being here tonight, was really just to introduce myself to you all and offer ourselves as a resource for whatever questions you all may have about not necessarily this specific project, because again, I'm not necessarily privy to the specifics of this project, nor could I speak to this specific project, but the industry in general, how we operate in the state, I'd be happy to answer whatever questions you all have and just provide any information along those lines.
I have a question.
Okay, we're going to hold questions until later. Thank you.
How do you stop
Please, we've got to stick with the plan, okay? Jason, thanks for your
Thanks,
comments. Mayor Ahrens, thank you for coming in this evening. You've got an item on your agenda for tomorrow at your
Yeah, tomorrow night we actually have an agenda item to go over this. It's not in Broomfield County, by the way. We own 100 foot of right-of-way is all we have. So we don't have any authorization, any jurisdiction over these spacing applications. But when I was talking to Clint today, what I can do is share some of Broomfield's experiences that we've had. And we've had oil and gas production in Broomfield since the 50s. It's been a long time. To the 3 new trustees, welcome. To the challenges of oil and gas. I still remember, I got to share a story. We're meeting with a company called Extraction on our first initial meeting with the owners of the company. And they said, you don't realize how much money your community is going to make if we bring in these oil and gas.
Do we get that money?
And I asked him, I said, well, about how much would that be? And he said, well, probably about $1 million a year. I offered to him right there, we will pay you $1 million a year to go away. They didn't take that offer, by the way. So originally the project was 179 wells. And we realized there's a lot of frustration with oil and gas. And some of the old properties that we have are old technology, like I mentioned, from the 50s and 60s, and they leak. They They create those VOCs and that type of thing. The newer technology we've been promised is a lot better. So we realized that as a local government, and we've been working on this a long time, since personally I was on city council from 2001 to 2009. I dealt with it then. I took a 4-year break, got elected mayor, and we've been dealing with it every year since 2013. So the trustees, good luck. It's a long process. But I want to say there's things that you can do. And as I was listening to Matt's presentation over there are some things that you can do. What we did at Broomfield is we created best management practices, which far exceeded what the states were. For example, the setbacks are 500 feet or 1,000 feet of schools. Broomfield's are 1,320 feet. We put together a task force of 16 people to look at oil and gas. We actually had oil executives from Mobil that were on that, citizens, and we looked at everything you could possibly look at with oil and gas, and how do you get it to the best management practices. And so we worked, one of the first things we looked at was setbacks, because that's everyone's immediate concern, sound, noise, smell, and everything. And it all dissipates logarithmically as you go forward. So what are the proper numbers? So one of the first things we did when we looked at the oil and gas is the tanks. that is some of the most dangerous things around oil and gas is the tank batteries. So we wanted to eliminate that. So you saw the picture that Matt had of the 24 tank battery site that's up there berthed. Broomfield will not have that. What we required was that all production and all gas go through pipelines. In fact, the pipelines, the state standard is 3 feet. We're having them buried 5 feet. So we have no tank batteries. Number one, no tank batteries. So when they're done and getting ready to produce, you really won't see the well. So that was important to us. When you talk about the air quality, that's one of the main things that people are worried about is the air quality. And no doubt that should be of a concern. And so we have 24/7 air monitoring. We're working with the state of Colorado and Colorado State and a private company, Ajax. We're going to be doing 24/7 air monitoring. And if we have an issue, we're going to address it immediately. One of the other things we've done is we've engaged with our fire department, the North Metro, and we've created an emergency preparedness plan. And that includes evacuation routes. You know, you have to be very, very smart on what you're doing and think it all through. Even today, I'm good. Of course I'm good. Anyway. And who are you with? Oh, Channel 9? Okay. I've heard of you guys. So some of the things that we have done, you know, we've come up with the best management practice that we could, because one of the benefits that we actually also get, I don't think, are there any oil wells in Superior?
Not active.
Well, we're actually getting about 40 old wells removed. So when you actually look at Broomfield, we're going to go from 40 locations down to 6. Wow. And so that's actually an improvement. Is it the best? No. But it is an improvement to go from 40 locations down to about 6. And, you know, the whole process of the hydraulic fracturing, I have to confess, I used to be an oil and gas engineer. I spent many years down in Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Texas, and I was involved on many wells that had oil and gas. And what channel are you?
Channel 4.
Okay, great. Yeah, it was a little traffic jam getting in here tonight. I will share with you one of Broomfield's first meetings we actually held at the First Bank Center.
Wow.
We had 1,000 people attend.
There's probably that many outside.
You know, and isn't that unfortunate? It's too bad that not everybody could get in. And we had 1,200 streaming, so who knows how many are actually streaming. Wow. So I think that's the largest meeting. Let me tell you something else at that meeting that I found pretty interesting. At that first meeting, we invited Matt Lepore at the time, and he was the director of GOCC, and Mark Levy, head of the Colorado Department of Public Health, come to the meeting to be experts. And what was ironic and hard for me to forget is I introduced them. Think about that. Director of Oil and Gas, the head of Colorado Department of Health didn't know each other. It was rather shocking when, you know, actually realized that they didn't know each other. And so, you know, it's one of those things. There's something else that we're actually looking at that just came up on council, was a question on what you can do with the sound waves from the fracking. There are some people at our neighbors up in Erie that are reporting that they're hearing humming, that they're hearing is slow wave vibrations. And guess where there's absolutely no regulations on oil and gas? Vibrations. So it's an opportunity, it's something that we're actually going to be looking into, Matt, is the vibrations. You know, when you've got that low level, you know, what are the effects of that? They haven't been looked at. The Colorado Department of Health hasn't looked at. So it may be an opportunity to do something. But what I'm going to tell you with Broomfield is no one in Broomfield asked for oil and gas to come into our community. But we did the best thing we could. When I talked to several of my other council members today, and when we heard about the Rocky Flat situation, I got to tell you, I think we were all appalled. in Broomfield, give you a little bit of history, but we had the tritium scare years ago into our water supply. And we had to change water supplies from the Great Western. We now get our water either from Denver or we go through the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District through Carter. But we no longer get our water from the Great Western Reservoir because we had tritium in the water, which is a radioactive isotope. And so when we first heard about this a week ago, one of the reasons that it's on our study session or city manager's report is we want to keep on top of it. And so I think, we would stand with Superior. I had people ask me, what's Broomfield going to do? We will do what we can, but I will tell you, it is frustrating. It is frustrating. So what I would advocate for the people to understand, these folks, your trustees, have a tough job. They have a real tough job ahead of them. And what we need to do on a Colorado level, I've already been down. Matt, we were actually down at the state capitol. We were both testifying on the same side. And it was about the reporting that oil and gas was doing. And one of the comments that was made at the oil and gas, that they testified, a group called Vital of Colorado, they testified that if we changed the rules, it was too difficult for them because they had so many problems. And I thought, next time I come back to testify, I'm going to use their testimony. Because they have so many problems, they thought it would be onerous. So I don't know what to tell you. If there's anything that, questions, you're more than welcome. We can send over our best management practices that we did, our updated ordinances that we did, 2067. And like I said, I've been in oil and gas a long time, and I want to share with you one little story. When I first got on council in 2001, and in 2002, we had a developer getting ready to plat homes, and I knew about the oil and gas. I went and got the map from Adams County. We had just become a city and county in November of 2001, and I realized they had actually platted houses on top of old plug and abandoned wells. No kidding. They had gone through the planning process. They'd gone through the first council meeting. So they're getting ready to do the second council meeting. And at that time, a developer's ready to, crank the cork off the champagne and celebrate because they've gone through all the meetings. And here's this rookie council member saying, this is a horrible idea. You're putting houses right on top of plug and abandoned wells. So what we did is they had to literally go out and replat their whole development. We required 50 by 100 foot setbacks on all the plug and abandoned wells. And at the same time, we had a little requirement that we also tossed in there, the removal of all gas lines. Think about Firestone. What happened in Firestone could not happen in Broomfield because we had enacted that back in 2002. So we were 15 years ahead of our time. So, and that was because of my oil and gas experience.
Okay.
So,
Mayor Aaron's. Thank you, Mayor Aarons. We appreciate you coming in tonight. All right, at this time, we've made it through our four presenters, and we're open for board member questions of our experts. Who'd like to start?
Evening. Thanks for coming. For those that have not previously been to a work session or a board meeting, they're not always this crowded, so we will save you a seat next time, we promise. Matt, you talked about the consultation process and how we've raised our hand around the consultation process. Can you tell us a little bit about what that involves and what we'll be doing for that?
It's, so we'll work with the Department of Public Health and Environment staff to provide them our concerns and comments with the site. They'll take those into consideration and then work with the COGCC on whether mitigation needs to take place or to, hopefully deny the application based on our comments.
So are these provided by the town exclusively, and what's the time period for that?
They're provided by the town. It's a 40-day process, and that 40 days started when the application was submitted. So we're well into that. It'll be December when that closes.
Sometime mid-December,
Yes,
presumably.
yep.
Do we
We'll work
have-
with Matt and Tim Gablehouse to put one set of comments together to submit to them.
Okay. Are our comments attorney-client privilege? Are they available for the public, for our citizens to comment?
There'll be public comments.
Okay.
Yep.
So I know we've already, for those that haven't seen it, we have a website, or a section of our website. We've done the initial mailer. I think it may be helpful to have some timeline, presumably.
Yes, we can provide that, yeah.
Right, so if we're
Yep.
due in mid-December, let's shoot for having a draft sometime in early December.
Yes.
Iterate on that draft, be clear when, for the public, when we'll take
By
comment.
the 1st of December, my plan is to have those draft comments prepared, and then we can provide those to the board for review.
Okay. Matt, you talked about, you used the phrase industrial level noise. Is that a defined term, and what is that level of noise?
Yeah, it is a defined term.
Any chance you might go to the podium just for me too? Thanks.
That was Channel 9 speaking.
That is a defined term. The Oil and Gas Conservation Commission has in their regulations, the different levels of noise that are permitted during the different operations. And so for drilling and hydraulic fracturing, they are allowing for industrial level noise of 80 decibels during the day and 75 decibels at night. 80 decibels is equivalent to probably running a coffee grinder or your garbage disposal. It's loud, and if you were living 500 feet away, unfortunately there are no homes 500 feet away from the proposed location, that would be more than aggravating. It might cause you to lose sleep and could affect your health. Again, because they're going to be farther away, I'm assuming that no one's going to have to endure that level of noise.
Thanks. I'm going to limit my questions to 4 for now to try to spread it around. For the mayor, thank you for attending. Come up to the podium. So you are, as part of your manager's report, thank you, by the way, really helpful, and congratulations on some of the success. And I recognize you desired more success, but a reduction in your facility is an accomplishment. You have an agenda item tomorrow, because part of this is there is a small right-of-way. Do you, as Broomfield City Council or as part of staff, have the ability to impact that permitting required on that right-of-way?
Well, I would have to double check because we haven't had our meeting yet, so that would be a question I would ask, and that's a good question. We actually also sent a letter to the GOCC and requested an extension to increase that comment period. But I would have to get back with you, quite frankly, to see with that right-of-way, because my understanding is the right-of-way that we have isn't on the pad sites at all.
Right. So I think you may see me tomorrow. I'll preview 2 things. Number 1, I'd like the city of Broomfield support doing whatever you can to not, if you have the ability to put a little delay spray on your permitting process or not approve the permit because you have access to the right-of-way. That would be one thing. Second, if the city of Broomfield could consider a resolution in support of the town of Superior and our opposition to the drill site would be greatly appreciated. So you'll hear that from me tomorrow night.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. My 4th question, and then I'll take my time and maybe loop back. Do we have anybody from Level 3 or CenturyLink? Matt, I know we asked.
Not that I'm aware. We did contact CenturyLink, who's the property owner. CenturyLink is the property owner, but we're waiting for a response.
Okay, thank you.
Gave us responses.
Yeah, I think there's some information out there that maybe there's somebody who responded on Facebook. So as you're making that public comment, feel free to share that. So my questions for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
They claimed no
Next.
responsibility whatsoever.
Others? Question, Laura?
So Mayor Ahrens, I have a question for you. With regard to the protections that you had mentioned Broomfield put in, the 24/7 air monitoring, the emergency support options, are those things that Broomfield had to pay for, or did the oil and gas companies pay for those?
Some of each.
Okay,
Some of each. You know, we're going to be utilizing some of the revenues that are derived from the process itself. You know, the ad valorem taxes from oil and gas are pretty hefty. And so we'll be using some of that, but a lot of that, I got to tell you, we negotiated with the oil and gas, and we got them to pay for most things.
okay. And so then my next question is probably for Matt. With regard to just Highlands viability and that hearing that we're talking about having, we know that Highlands is really highly financially leveraged, and they've experienced losses of $5 million and $3.5 million in the last couple of years. Are concerns around financial stability, the ability to pay for these sorts of remediation things, are these appropriate to bring up in that hearing as something that could block their application?
Yes, is appropriate, and no, it never has worked with the current Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. I would think that you would want to bring that up, both at the drilling and spacing application, which is also ongoing, also the Form 2A, any mitigations that they think that they can put forward, they have to be able to prove, I would think they would have to prove that they can actually pay for those. That has never been an impediment to getting a state permit in the past. But it certainly could be, when it's coming before you, that could be something that you put forward as a bar that they have to reach.
Okay, thank you.
I'll let somebody else go, but a point I want to make on what she just asked, never before, I believe, has there been fracking under a active Superfund site extremely contaminated with plutonium. You need to understand that the buildings in the Superfund site on the central operable unit, most of them were imploded with plutonium in them. So even though this is going to be 8,000 feet below, et cetera, we've never seen this type of potential liability, I would bet, in the entire world, but certainly in the United States. So to have an underfunded company in really such an explosive area, I think is unprecedented. So I just want you to know that, because you weren't sure when you gave your presentation if there's plutonium on the site. Absolutely, there's plutonium on the site.
Yeah, and I do know that there's plutonium on the site, but the actual location where they're going to be doing the excavation and putting forward a drilling pad, an oil and gas pad, that would be something that you would want to test for, because that is off-site, but still could have been impacted by all the activity that happened.
Well,
in that
I'm
area.
addressing a different point,
Yeah.
in that the horizontal fracking, the overlays I've seen are absolutely right below the central operable unit.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mayor Ahrens. My questions are about Rocky Flats as well. So, you know, we've got oil and gas drilling now potentially going underneath the single most contaminated site, certainly in the country, possibly in the world. Has the DOE, which my understanding is the DOE owns the land that Rocky Flats sits on. They took possession of it when the feds moved in the 90s. Has DOE been consulted that there's going to be mining operations, drilling operations underneath Rocky Flats and fracking? If not, why not? And if not, we should definitely let the DOE know that these are the plans that are happening. Under those circumstances, at a minimum, shouldn't an environmental impact statement be required of anybody that is going to be going anywhere near Rocky Flats under NEPA? So these are just, I'm just thinking out loud here, but Rocky Flats is a Superfund site. I think under the circumstances, extra care, you know, the most extreme care needs to be given to any application involving any land use, any disturbance of land of Rocky Flats, especially given the fact that the opening to the wellhead is going to be on Superior's property. In terms of the public comment periods, we spoke to the extension to December 5th for the drilling application. Is that also true for the spacing application period? And what do we need to be aware of in terms of public comment? So there's a spacing application for the actual reserves that they're going to be tapping into, and then there's a separate public comment period for the drilling application in Superior. Are they both the same? Are they different? If they're different, what are the dates? Do we know this information?
They are different, and the drilling and spacing application is going forward. That is something that is heard by the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, and under current regulations, you have to put forward your protest 30 days in advance, which would put it right around November 18th.
November 18th? So next Monday?
Correct. It's 30 days in advance of the hearing before the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission.
So the hearing is scheduled?
They've requested spacing, and my sense is that, yes, it is scheduled. It likely will be postponed. There won't actually be a hearing before the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, but they will still stick to that same timeline, and if you want to protest, you still have to do so 30 days prior to the initial hearing.
So,
Trustee Lasis, I can speak to your question about DOE. So the Fish and Wildlife is in control of the majority of the Rocky Flats Refuge. The central operating area, which is where the prime making of the triggers happened, the DOE still has that, but the Fish and Wildlife has the majority of the refuge. Fish and Wildlife has had a meeting with the company as well as staff from COGCC, and either Fish and Wildlife or the Bureau of Land Management will be making comments related to the application.
what about DOE? Will they as well?
That did not come up, but Department of Energy, Bureau of Land Management, or Fish and Wildlife, or all three will be making comments.
Okay, they're gonna make comments on the application itself, on the spacing unit application, or on the drilling unit application in Superior?
On the spacing application.
Okay.
Under the refuge.
Can we reach out to Fish and Wildlife, to any of the appropriate federal agencies, to make sure that they understand what our position is on this?
I made clear to them our concerns as well for our site, and we discussed concerns on the refuge as well.
Okay. Can we also reach out to Senators Bennett and Gardner and the appropriate congressional delegation as well? Congressman-elect Ngoo should know about this. Jared Hull should know about this in the interim.
Yep.
Congressman Perlmutter, because this is probably in his district as well. With respect to Highlands Natural Resource, and this is probably a question more for Matt. I don't know if you're going to know this. Well, actually, you're both Matt. Matt Sura. Does Highlands recognize that they're dealing with a Superfund site? And is that relevant?
If they read the newspaper, they do. My sense is that what they will tell you, what the oil and gas industry's position is going to be, is that they are drilling 8,000 feet below the surface, and the contamination happens at around 30 at the most, probably more like 16 feet at the surface. And so there is no way that what they're doing more than a mile beneath the surface is going to be able to affect what happens above. No, I'm just telling you what they're going to say. That's going to be their position on this. And my position would be, one, the surface impacts at the actual well pad. They're disturbing what, we don't know whether or not there's plutonium there. There likely is, given the fact that that area has, some levels of it. And I would also argue that your point is a good one, that what are you doing when you're shaking the area? Because there is some small vibration that is created. And do we know that there's any fractures out there? One of the things that you first do if you're going to start developing any resource for oil and gas development. You go out there and you characterize the area through seismic testing, typically. You take these thumper trucks out there and you shake the ground a little bit, and you've got these receivers in the other area that are receiving these seismic echoes, and they're able to characterize what's under the ground, even a mile, even 8,000 feet below the surface. That's important because they want to know where the Niobrara is and the Codell, which is what they're trying to produce, but they also need to know if there's any fractures or faults. And if they haven't done that, then they're not going to know. And I don't think that the Wildlife Service is going to allow for them to take 3 trucks, these huge trucks, onto the Wildlife Service's land and do this kind of seismic testing. So that in itself should probably delay this process.
Okay. Mayor Aaron's had a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a quick comment. It was back in 2012, 2013. Broomfield actually, along with Longmont and Fort Collins, tried to ban oil and gas. More drilling coming on. And what the courts ruled was because oil and gas is a statewide concern that we couldn't do that. However, they left a proviso that it would be permissible for a local governmental agency to take a short time period and go over your oil and gas procedures that you have in Superior. So you actually have an opportunity just right off the front to start a moratorium on oil and gas in Superior for up to 6 months, and you could do that at your next meeting.
And that was going to be my next question, Matt. If we were to impose a moratorium on drilling operations, what length of time would be appropriate? 6 months? A year?
The court case that he mentions actually mentions 6 months as something that is reasonable. I think that 6 months is a good start, and if you need more time, that you can always extend it. But 6 months is, I would say, is going to be the least amount of time that you would want.
And the purpose of that would be for us to enact appropriate regulations here in the town of Superior related to. Now this property, which is owned by CenturyLink, is and has been for years the top open space acquisition target of our open space advisory committee here in town. I understand what you said earlier about CenturyLink and the bonding and their permission not being required. Would there be any benefit if CenturyLink sold the property to us for open space purposes? If we were to designate it and dedicate it as open space, would that give us any potential advantage to stop, extraction from happening on that soil?
I think that that's something we ought to explore.
Okay. Last question, then I'm gonna let my colleagues take the dais. We're a statutory municipality. Is there any additional benefit to us going home rule for purposes of getting additional power over oil and gas development here in town?
There hasn't been an enormous benefit to a home rule municipality over statutory in the case law that we've seen so far. Having said that, I think that, yes, it should open up some additional avenues. But again, that would be something that you'd probably want to talk as a board. There's going to be some benefits and some liabilities to that.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Pass the mic.
Cindy?
I'm going to give my 4 questions to Kevin.
So first, thank you all the speakers for coming out tonight, and thank you everybody who's here in the audience. We appreciate all the passion and support out there. Jason, if you would, I'd like to hear from the industry perspective. We've heard a lot of questions about the Superfund site and any history. Are you aware of any pad sites, drilling, et cetera, that have occurred anywhere near Superfund sites in Colorado or elsewhere in the United States, for instance? Or if you have, what additional regulations, safety measures, mitigation strategies have been required?
I'm not aware of any, no.
Okay. And then a question for probably Matt Magley. The proximity of all the pad sites touch on a lot of different jurisdictions. Have there been any coordination with our neighboring municipalities or governments, besides Broomfield, obviously, to have a coordinated response and effort towards this?
Yeah, last week when we met with the Oil and Gas Commission staff, the staff from the city of Westminster was also present at that meeting, and the staff from the town of Erie were also present. So we talked about sharing our comments with them, and they would share their comments with us, and we coordinate our comments as we needed to.
Thank you. Mayor Ahrens, can you provide any insight on any additional lawsuits that may be active that impact your municipality? Any information on the Wild Earth Guardians or resident rights lawsuits that you could provide information on?
Yeah, we actually have an executive session on that tomorrow night. And I don't really know what I can discuss on that, so I'm going to let that one go. But there's a lawsuit being put forth, Broomfield, the Wildlife Guardians, arguing that the city manager acted inappropriately in signing off on our community drilling, our comprehensive drilling plan. So that's what the lawsuit's about. So we actually have citizens suing their own community, which I find rather sad.
Thank you very much, and I'll yield the rest of my questions.
Neil?
I'll echo what everyone said. Thank you for coming out. I didn't expect this to be the first meeting for the trustees, but it is what it is. And we're going to do what we can to stop this. This first comment or questions to Mayor Ahrens. I know the airport sits in Broomfield, but it's overseen by Jefferson County, and it has a thriving and growing aircraft school or aviation school. How does 62 40-foot tall tanks just to the west of the flight line potentially affect the growth of the airport or the school? Has the FAA been consulted, or do they need to be consulted for this sort of monstrosity in the aerospace?
Okay, well, first a correction. The airport's actually located in Jefferson County.
Oh, sorry.
So if you get hold of the Jefferson County commissioners, Libby Szabo, and that would be a better person to be able to answer that. Those are good questions, and I doubt if the FAA's been consulted on that.
Okay. And this is a question, I think, for Jason and for Matt, and possibly for Mayor Ahrens as well. The National Renewable Energy Lab sits up down the street, west. They put that there for a reason. The spotty and extremely strong winds that we get are ripe for an aviation or aerospace, air testing center. When you have a bunch of roughnecks working round the clock on a facility like this, who bears the responsibility for an accident? Minor, major, with the kinds of winds, 80-mile-an-hour winds have been clocked up there on a regular basis. This is an extreme environment. How does that responsibility get borne by the town, the city, the county, the company? We've talked about how they're thinly capitalized. They'll outsource all of this. The last financing they did was $5 million in April. They're bleeding through that quickly. I'm curious, with the permit in hand, they might be able to go get additional financing, but the first accident, we're going to go start shaking the taxpayers to fix it?
Yeah, we're actually working with the GOCC right now to talk about insurance regulations and bonding, because, it's a good point. If you were to have a fire like they did in Firestone, how much money do these companies have set aside? What kind of funds do they have available through their insurance companies? And when I think the company originally came through us, they had like $1 million.
Right.
And there's homes in the area that are worth more than $1 million.
Kind of.
So it seemed wholly inadequate to be able to do that. So that's another thing we're actually working with the state in trying to get those limits raised, is on the insurance. And if you want to talk about roughnecks and people who worked on the oil site, you're talking to someone that worked on the oil site. And, I keep a picture in my phone I could share with you. One of the reasons that I'm concerned, I've been on one of those blowouts. I've seen it happen. I've seen people killed on oil sites. And so, the responsibility is the individual companies on the individual workers, but You know, if you were to have a major industrial accident, you know, the question, you know, with this company, Highlands, do they have the money to cover it? No. What do? They're a corporation. What does a corporation do if they have problems?
Bankruptcy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Others, Matt, you want to, anything you want to add, Matt?
That's my last question.
The one thing that I might add is that Jefferson County is really important to bring into this in a meaningful way. What I've experienced with other local governments is that typically they don't find a municipality that they want to take a corner of and locate oil and gas development in, because you're going to have a higher set of regulations maybe. Certainly there's going to be a higher profile, more citizen concern, and it's frankly a municipality where we like to put people in businesses rather than industrial level oil and gas development. So they could easily find another location to bond on that would be just outside of the city limits, the town limits. And then you don't have anything to say about it. You're going to be like everybody else in this room who's just writing comments to the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission to have them fall on deaf ears. So you really need to consider whether or not you can bring in and as an ally, the Jefferson County commissioners. They really need to be part of this process.
Actually, I had one last question, and this is for Matt. What's the failure rate for the casements that you've seen? I know we all know that this lives under Rocky Flats and, you know, it has what it has, but what's the typical industrial failure rate for these casements?
Well, that's a little bit beyond what I'm prepared
Or maybe Jason could answer it.
to give numbers for. Jason, you ready for that?
I don't know the specific numbers on that.
Okay, because I mean, 1% with 30 lines is a humongous number when you're talking about the dust that we have sitting there.
It's far less than that.
Okay.
If you're talking about casing that led to contaminated groundwater, we've got 62 cases in the entire state of Colorado, over 54,000 wells. So, you know, it isn't going to be 1%. However, one is enough.
Right.
Or one is way too many.
Thank you.
Sandy.
Can I just answer your question real quick? The casing's made out of P20 hardened steel. That casing will last thousands of years. It isn't the casing itself that creates a problem. It's the annulus around the casing that's between the formation and the casing. So they run that cement down there and they allow that to dry. But the challenge is when you go down there so many times as they're going in there and perforating the zones, they go down that casing, and when they frack, they're going to shake it. And so the question is that concrete going to stand up? And from what Mr. Sura said, there's been 64 cases, and there's 64 cases that are known. How many does that actually happen to is a good question. So the casing itself, I wouldn't be worried about it. It's that annulus on the outside of the casing between the formation. And it's like anything else, pressure travels the path of least resistance. So whenever you've got a borehole, that is now your path of least resistance.
So Matt, we are getting some reports from residents who've reached out to CenturyLink that CenturyLink says it doesn't know anything. In fact, it sounds like that may be the case, right? Based on this bonding. Is it possible that CenturyLink really doesn't know anything about what's happening on their land or what can happen?
I can't speak to what's possible, because anything's possible. What the law says is that they have to be given a fair offer to use their land. They have to be given a surface use agreement or offered a surface use agreement. At this point, they would have had to have been notified that they're putting forward a permit. So somebody within that large corporation does know or has seen something likely. But then again, you know, this Upland maybe didn't send them the required documentation. They were in a huge rush, according to news reports, to get these applications in any form before 112 possibly passed. And so it may be that they took some shortcuts and didn't even notify them.
Level 3, CenturyLink just in the recent past, how long ago was this acquired, level 3?
Yeah, a
Okay.
year.
So this acquisition by CenturyLink of level 3 is somewhat fresh, right? Do you understand contract law and all that kind of stuff? When CenturyLink acquired level 3, I assume level 3 had to disclose if it had sold the mineral rights or the surface rights or whatever to the new buyer, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so if level 3 knew anything at all about any potential here, wouldn't that have to have been disclosed to CenturyLink?
It would have, and I think what might be telling is that on their application, they put level 3 as the owner. And so it may be that they were sending it to the wrong party. It could be that that's old information. It could be that they just took a shortcut and didn't fill it out in properly. There's a lot we don't know.
Okay, so some of my things are going to be questions, some are going to be assertions, and this is going to be an assertion. It's absolutely imperative that staff and the appropriate attorneys meet with CenturyLink, the appropriate person, the correct person, as soon as possible. I hope we've established that, okay? So I'm leaving the board, but I hope these board members are notified pretty promptly that there's going to be such a meeting. I wanted to clarify some stuff about the site, Rocky Flats. Rocky Flats is divided into 2 parts. About 1,400 acres in the core is the central operable unit. It is managed and controlled by the Department of Energy. So Trustee Lacis's question is very relevant. What does a DOE know and what does a DOE allow? So that is imperative. The surrounding core of 4,500 acres or so is owned by Fish and Wildlife Service. That's the refuge. That's the one that a long time ago EPA said it's safe for any and all uses. Now we as a town have disputed that, but that's what EPA says. So that they have to be treated differently. On the central operable unit are many things that do respond to vibrations. For example, they have unstable original landfills that have periodically slumped, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm no engineer, and I don't know if that's down 8,000 feet, how that vibrates to the surface. But there are absolutely some important things that are critical that we understand in that central operable unit. So it's going to be imperative. Tim Gablehouse, the other environmental attorney on this matter, understands all these things. So the way you and he, I'm very interested in reading the end comment that you guys put together. But to me, it's that central operable unit in which we have our best case, that we have to be very serious about how we make that argument. Randy, Randy Aarons, Broomfield's a member of the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council.
Yes, we are.
And we've got 10 local governments that are members of that. Westminster, Arvada, Jeffco, Broomfield, Superior, Thornton, Boulder County, et cetera. So again, going to what Trustee Lacis has already said, it's imperative that we have this consortium that hopefully is of a like mind, especially around fracking under a Superfund site. So I'm going to put you on the spot because you have this meeting tomorrow. I certainly hope it's raised with your council tomorrow at their meeting, whether or not they can be in support of a superior position that says there should never be fracking under a Superfund site. So that's what I'm looking for you, particularly for leadership on. I hope I can count on you.
Well, I hope I don't get to vote, because I only vote in case ties. So I hope our council would take a position where I don't have to vote and they would support that. So far, I know we're going to the next, I believe there's a special meeting called from the Stewardship Council already. If I saw that email,
Right.
one of the many. And I can see no reason why Broomfield wouldn't support. I mean, going under a plutonium site's just, I
Right.
can't imagine.
Well, and you've been affected in such egregious ways with having to have a whole new water supply because you had blue baby syndrome there. I mean, you felt this firsthand, what those environmental impacts on the public health can be. So I hope you support that.
Sure.
Thank you. Can you also address with us, I know it's not a popular question, but if, heaven help us, we can't do anything about this, what are the money flows to a community like Broomfield for oil and gas?
Well, generally, Matt can speak to the leasing requirements are generally anywhere between 14 and 21% to the mineral owners. The surface right agreements is up to each individual entity to figure that out. To the residents, there's some ad valorem taxes. In Broomfield, with the 81 wells that we have, it's about $450 million. And, that's kind of based on the mill levies, if you will, of a community. So Broomfield itself is like 11.4 mils, the county's 13.2, but predicated on whatever school district. Broomfield has 6 school districts inside its county boundaries, and those all would receive money, as well as the fire district.
So you're a city and a county.
Correct.
In this case, we're the town of Superior, and this is Jeffco land. So Matt Sura, do we understand how that would work for our town?
I don't have those numbers, nor do I know what special districts might be in part of where they're proposing to drill. What I can tell you is that all those assessments are based on where it's coming from. That is where the wellheads are located. And the wellheads located in the town of Superior, you're going to see some benefit, ad valorem property tax, and there are probably school districts that would also benefit based on its location within that school district.
So with 31 wellheads on town of Superior property, we would benefit from those 31. Is that what I heard you say?
Correct.
Okay. Even though the product actually is being extracted elsewhere.
Well, those mineral owners would get their share as well, predicated on how much land that they owned. And, we get into something called forced pooling, that type of thing. So I don't know how many owners. I can't imagine there's a lot of owners on the Rocky Flats land.
So in this case, what they said on their website, Upland has said on their website, is that they own 100% of the minerals that they're proposing to develop in this area. So there aren't any other mineral owners.
Say that again, Matt.
What they had said is that they own or control 100% of the oil and gas minerals, of the mineral rights in the area that they're proposing to develop in what they call their West Denver oil and gas development.
So would they have gotten those from the federal government?
I'm 2 days on the job here, and I can't answer that question, but it's important to know.
It is troubling.
It's important to know who has those mineral rights, and if those mineral rights are owned by them, or if there's a federal tie, that would be really helpful to us, because that does bring in NEPA.
Right, because 6,000 acres are owned by some division of the federal government, Fish and Wildlife or DOE. Now, I don't know if they have the mineral rights or who the heck owns those, so perhaps that's an investigation that needs to happen. But it's intriguing nonetheless. And then Randy Aarons again, impacts on infrastructure. We have one of our most heavily traveled roads, McCaslin Boulevard, right there that intersects 128. And I'm very concerned about that heavy tanker traffic up and down that road. So what have your infrastructure impacts, what have they been? And then 2, can we limit traffic, or Matt Magley, on McCaslin to keep it on 128, down 36 and off
Yeah,
McCaslin?
you can mitigate the truck traffic if you require pipelines rather than them being trucked off. So, that's part of you taking 6 months to go get a drilling plan, put together an oil and gas plan, is require that they remove the assets through the pipelines. That will alleviate some of the trucks. I don't remember the exact number of trucks that Broomfield's already going to see because of the 84 wells that we have, and with all the sand trucks, the water trucks, and everything else, I believe the truck traffic, if I remember correctly, was 38,000 truck trips. And so we have developed a traffic plan and a traffic study as part of our comprehensive drilling plan.
What about impacts on water supply? Where do they get their water to do all this fracking with?
Well, they're getting most of their water from the FRICO. They're not using any Broomfield water.
So I think we'd have to understand that as well. And then, so Matt, do you know ability to control traffic down McCaslin? Do we have the authority?
Yeah, we have authority, especially if it's a large number of trucks. There would need to be either mitigation factors put in place or other measures.
And then Matt Sura, you gave that graphic, very troubling graphic of all the smells and the fumes and the whatever. If for those of us who went out on the ridge when Kevin had his thing yesterday, so we're up, this is up high, and so Superior's a valley underneath, and the concern is that these things can just settle over us. What's your experience with other communities?
My experience is that volatile organic compounds generally do settle. They're heavier than surrounding air, and some of the highest levels of benzene that have been recorded in the state have been recorded in the morning in a depression where they had all night, that the volatile organic compounds were settling in one area. So yeah, that is a concern.
So if we do air monitoring, we should have air monitoring in our lower community as well to figure out what's settling here.
That's right. If we
Okay.
get that far, I don't expect that we will.
And then any experience by any of you experts on bentonite soils and vibrations? Because we are in the thick of it here.
As is most of Colorado. And there hasn't been any concerns around bentonite soils based on the fact that the development that they're doing is 8,000 feet below the surface. Where you get into a little bit of concern in bentonite soils is when they do that seismic testing and they're actually, vibrating the surface. That would be something where you would want to have them at least 300 feet away from homes, at least.
There is a 24-year-old seismic study that I read over the weekend and sent to the board. I believe it was done by DOE, but it did not anticipate fracking in it, as far as I can tell. So to me, it's meaningless because we're in a fracking environment. Again, going to NEPA and all environmental impact statements and all that kind of stuff. Is there a requirement for a current seismic study? I mean, are seismic studies required, and do they need to be made current if in fact they didn't anticipate this?
Right. So the seismic study that you're referring to was whether or not an actual earthquake would affect the activity that was ongoing at the time at Rocky Flats. The seismic studies that I'm discussing are something that's entirely different, where they're actually seismically shaking very gently the surface. Those seismic vibrations go down and they're reflected off of the geology, and they are able to then characterize or map that geology underneath. And so that seismic study that I'm referring to is what is going to allow Uplands or any other oil and gas development developer to stay in formation when they're developing their resource and to know where the faults are and the fractures are.
But is that something they choose to do for their own economic benefit, or does the state require that?
They choose to do it for their own economic benefit so they can stay in formation.
That's all.
I just have a couple follow-up questions. Matt, you spoke to earlier about the ability of the local government and the landowner, where the surface rights are, to initiate a hearing at the COGCC, right? And you said that that is never been done or rarely done. Can you speak more to that, why that is never done? Is it because municipalities are pro-oil and gas development? Is it because it's just been done for so many years and it's rare to have a municipality that hasn't had it in the past? speak to why is it rarely
Yeah,
done?
I can. Honestly, I think that it's because the oil and gas industry, when they're going to be developing oil and gas resources, recognize that the local jurisdiction has the ability to permit or deny their activity. And so they meet with that local jurisdiction and ultimately come to some sort of agreement to allow the development to go forward. And I haven't seen a situation where the local government was put into a position where they were just going to say no, and then they went out ahead. And again, this is something that's never even been litigated, whether or not in a jurisdiction that does require a permit, as the town of Superior does, and they try to do oil and gas development without getting a permit, I think you've got a winning lawsuit on your hands.
So you just said that the local government has the ability to permit or deny, right? And based on what we have on the books right now, that's what, insufficient in terms of going forward, in terms of denying something to a permit application?
You know, I think probably something that I'd want to talk to you all about in executive session.
Okay.
A follow-up question related to that. It was the local government or the landowner, not and the landowner, correct?
Either one can require a hearing before the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission. Either one has standing to require a hearing. No one else does. And that's what's really troubling, one of the many things troubling about this oil and gas industry and the Conservation Commission regulations, is that it doesn't afford anyone due process. If you are living immediately adjacent to a pad that's going to have, in this case, 31 wells, 61 tanks, if you're living immediately adjacent to that, even within 500 feet, you don't have the right to require a hearing before the decision maker, the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission. If it's just outside of your jurisdiction using your roads, you don't have the ability to require a hearing before the decision maker. And that needs to change, frankly. That's state legislation that needs to be addressed as soon as possible.
Okay. Another question, Ken?
Yeah, I have another follow-up question. So we've heard concern about financial standing of these companies and whatnot if something were to go wrong. One of the things Highlands has put out about this project on their website is that it's suited to a third party for both financing and management, and Highlands will seek to maintain a significant carried interest without dilution or development cost burdens for shareholders. Is this a typical type of relationship for these projects? And then B, is there any type of oversight requirements for third parties from Highlands in this instance? And then C, if an accident were to occur, does liability flow down? Should we be concerned about the third parties, or does it stay with Highlands?
Okay. All good questions. There are companies, oil and gas companies, that only go through the permitting process, get these things permitted either through the state government, and if there's a local government process, they get it through the local government process, and then they have kind of a package to sell, and that they sell that package, and any requirements in a conditional use permit, a special use permit, memorandum of understanding or operator agreement, the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission also puts on permit conditions. All those then transfer to the new operator in that case. There is not a requirement that they have adequate insurance or bonding. That's something that you can require here as a local government, but the state does not require adequate insurance or bonding at the present time.
Okay.
I just have one last question. So we've heard from a number of, a tremendous amount of the community here. People are really concerned, understandably, about the health, safety, and welfare of their community. What can they do? What is your advice to the community in terms of the best impact that they can make in terms of, is it writing comments on the COGCC, public comment process? Is it talking to your local legislators? Is it talking, to us? Like, where's the most bang for the buck with the public? Because the public wants to be heard.
Right. The answer is yes to all of the above. I think that we heard already, though, that that the town of Superior is working hard on your behalf and in your interest. Maybe that wouldn't be the first place I would put time. Talking to your legislators, that's where a lot of the reform has to happen. We also have a new governor, and the governor has a lot to say about who is going to be appointed to the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission and who is going to be the director of the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, and when they are starting to look at new rulemaking at the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. A lot of that work, that the reform that we've been talking about tonight, has to happen at the state legislature and in the administration.
Okay, we're going to get to public comment shortly, but, yeah. Okay, board questions, additional board questions, and then we'll go to public comment. Anything further? Okay. Thank you for our guests, that Mayor Ahrens, thank you. Somebody turned off the lights, so if you could turn them back on, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Mayor Ahrens, for coming out. If you're welcome to stay through public comment if you'd like, or if you got your own.
We actually amended our rules of the meetings because we got tired of staying up till 2 o'clock. And I've got a meeting tomorrow night, but, you know, sincerely, if anyone has any questions, I've gotten probably 50, 60 emails today. And, you know, I wanted to come out here because there were some people that evidently thought that Broomfield brought in this project, and we did not.
We need to show up at your meeting.
Oh, I'll show up at my meeting.
We need to.
Oh, yeah, we'll be taking this up. It's a city manager's report, so it won't come up until 10 o'clock or so. You know, so you might want to stream before you come over and just get an idea, but obviously you're more than welcome. And we only take public comment on the topic as it comes up later. We do have a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting, but that's for items not on the agenda. Anyway,
Okay,
good luck. And
that's a good point. Yeah, thank you. All right. I saw Melissa's hand first, so we'll take, yep, please go to the mic, and I'll just get people as you wave at me. Brian, you'll be on deck. Okay, third. Yep.
2 minutes?
Yep.
Then 2 minutes?
And ladies and gentlemen, please, if you could limit your comments to 2 minutes, please, and that would help us get through more people. So please, 2 minutes, 2-minute limit.
Less.
Thank you.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Melissa Thornton. I'm a citizen here in the town of Superior, and I really like the ending question with what can we citizens do? I personally have had some wonderful experience in this town with what's called an initiative, and it's where we, the citizens, actually have a voice. We come together, we sign a petition, and that has to, with enough signatures, be voted upon. So a lot of these state legislature issues that are state laws, it's my understanding, and I do not have a legal background, but I would defer to the attorney for this, that we can actually have an impact on the laws about whether or not we can frack underneath Rocky Flats and so on and so forth. And so I would just bring that to the point and say, you've got a wonderful turnout here, and it's a great beginning to a petition. So if we have to move fast on things and have things signed by Sunday, the 18th, maybe by Friday we get a petition going. I don't know if we currently have one in place, but we definitely should, to get signatures and to push forward initiative. Maybe we're the first municipality in this country to turn this around and to write laws that has, you know, our town supporting us. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Brian. Brian's next, and then I have, there's a lady, you're right there, you're next, and then you'll be third. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Sora, did he leave?
He's here.
Matt, so as the, I'm Brian Sheltikoff. I'm with the HOA board of Rock Creek. Sandy, thanks so much for bringing up bentonite soils. Many of our homeowners have experienced major damage to their home due to having bentonite soils, arguably the worst in the state. Certainly this is a consideration. Whether or not it matters, the fact that this company has limited capital, in some ways spinning the dice with debt capital funding, they have very little skin in the game. My question for you is, if you look at the changing nature of the state, it's a very different population than it was in the 1950s. I'd argue that given the advancing sizable gains in population, even in the last 5 years, that the state has been transformed, that the collective interests of the citizens is very different than it used to be. Is it potentially worthwhile litigating? Legislation is certainly the right strategy. If you look at who's been elected, if you look at the margins of victories of many that are against fracking in certain communities, but is extensive litigation also a good play here, especially given that they have limited capital? But again, the thinking is that if you look at, say, the tobacco industry, for decades, the tobacco industry was able to win on suits based on assumption of risk. Finally, an innovative attorney came up with the idea of suing for Medicaid reimbursement. But the idea here is, given the changing nature of Coloradans, the collective desires of Coloradans, even in the last 5 years, could extensive litigation also be a good option here?
Okay, but instead of having Q&A with our panel, let's, in the interest of getting through as many public comments as we can, let's have some questions logged here by the board, and we'll have some follow-up towards the end, but I would like to get through as much public comment as we can. So questions are noted, and we'll...
Would you mind if you just answer this one?
Well, if we do that, we're going to get through half of the question. So let's, just in fairness to all the people that have comments to make, let's hold those.
We want to hear it. Yes or no? Are you going to talk about it in the executive session?
Even for a matter of a few seconds.
I would want to talk about, it's kind of session anyways, but I think it's, your point is valid.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next question.
Hi, I'm Hillary Kellogg. I'm a resident in Rock Creek. My kids go to El Dorado K through 8. And I just have a couple of comments / questions. I know the Mayor Ahrens mentioned best management practices, and I wasn't really clear about who would pay for those once they were put into place. But building on Brian's extensive litigation, kind of litigate them until they're broke, sort of, that's what I was inferring from that comment. I'm wondering if it's possible to require, and this is just one, methods out of many, require such onerous BMPs and onerous requirements on the owner that this project is no longer financially viable for them, given their fragile financial state. So that's one comment. My second comment is, and I don't know if Matt, if you discussed EIAs or environmental impact assessments with, I think you said Fish and Wildlife or DOE or BLM or whoever you met with, but that is certainly something that could help delay this process until, we get all of our ducks in a row, so to speak, and also, could unearth some really profound environmental impacts that would, make rejection of this application a no-brainer, hopefully. And then I just have a third quick one. Again, it was just about the radioactive soils on a Superfund site that everybody, everyone who has spoken mentioned thus far, and what the impacts of even slight vibrations would be on soil disturbance and sort of kicking up some of that radioactive material. And I know the extension of C-470 was shut down because of the surface impacts of it. And I'm just wondering if we could get an investigation of the relationship between the underground activity and how that does affect the surface. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next, and then if you're interested in making public comment, if you just kind of make your way over and kind of maybe start forming over there. Not everybody at once, but just as there's room over there. Thank you. Go ahead.
My name's Phyllis Reiner, and I live in Superior. And given the financial instability of the developer and the high level of risk associated with the project, I ask that the board consider whether we can go to the voters to pass a health and safety tax on this developer that would raise sufficient funds to both potentially challenge the economics of the project as well as to ensure that we cover ourselves if something unforeseen happened.
Okay, thank you for the comments.
Hi, thanks. I'm Michelle Gabrielov Parrish. I'm a resident of Rock Creek. I'm also a founder of Candelas Glows that's been raising awareness about Rocky Flats and some of the radioactive issues in our backyard as well. And has even been looking a little bit at this clay capping, which is what seals Rocky Flats. It's made of clay, so when we're talking about seismic activity, that's definitely a concern. It's already been broken. The floods of 2013 broke it, and it doesn't look like it's all the way recapped. So I'm actually curious just about people's level of interest of involvement. So I'm wondering, first of all, is everybody here a Superior resident? Okay. And are you all, everybody here is opposed? Okay. That's so exciting. Is there anyone here that's just like, I didn't know what this is, I'm waiting to, no, okay. I'm also curious maybe about people's level of involvement. Are there people that are willing to get to work on this a little bit? Okay.
Stand on the corner.
Okay. If we, yeah, they have a delay in the back. Because I was already envisioning, I didn't know this would be so big. I was kind of envisioning different groups that could start to coalesce. Because we do need that policy level work. We do need the legislative work. We also need some community-based groups, people who are willing to leaflet, talk to people at the schools, fundraise, canvas, help build some community-based coalitions. So we have a meeting on Thursday at 5:30 at College Hill Library. We actually have a representative from COGCC who will be there. It's also in partnership with 350.org. So I would suggest that some of you come to that. That's on Thursday. But I also don't want to just be at meetings all the time. I want to be able to take action. So I'm looking at all of these different ways to get involved. The other thing I'm curious about, so someone's saying they're willing to stand on the corner. Is anyone else that's interested in direct action, being out there on the 17th? Okay. Yeah? Okay. Because we have a month, and we've been fighting stuff at Rocky Flats. The town has been in a lawsuit. We have another lawsuit with a bunch of community groups against U.S. Fish and Wildlife for opening the refuge. And with a month left, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about will be really difficult to do. With a month left, all the comments in the world, I think, to COGCC won't make that big of a difference. So if people are willing to get together, get trained, come up with some really creative solutions, please check out Candelas Glows. We're really active on Facebook. Please reach out to us there. Yeah, it's after Candelas, that development that is our neighbor. So it's Candelas, Candelas Glows. Yeah. Okay. I'll put it on the 0027 group. What was it? Michelle Gabrielov Parrish.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can put it on the Anything Goes to 00 page as well. Candelas Glows.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not on next
Thank you
door.
for-
Someone can do that.
Thank you for the
And then
comments
maybe
today.
we'll see you Thursday as the next step.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for having us. I'm actually a resident of City of Westminster. The reason I'm here is because the day after Proposition 112 did not pass in our state, we received a similar public comment on a Facebook page for the City of Westminster regarding the same company putting an application for drilling near the Stanley Lake and a dog park. The comments and the response from the City of Westminster residents was overwhelming, and everybody pretty much got involved. Surprisingly, we heard from the city officials that that company withdrew its application from the City of Westminster for receiving a permit. So it looks like the same company is just trying different areas of the town. So, and it looks like Superior, being a smaller city and not a part of the Jefferson County, might have been possibly a reasonable target for the company. However, I'm here to tell you that During my undergrad studies, I'm an electrical engineering major. I received my electrical engineering major from Colorado School of Mines. My husband is also a petroleum engineer. I did a research project about the implications of the Rocky Flats in early 2000s as a part of our course, which was called Nature and Human Values. So without going through too much of the details of that, at that time, we were still, the state was involved with the cleanup process. I'll tell you a little bit of the research implications, at least the health effects of the Rocky Flats on the Jefferson County, the city of Arvada, and the area, as we know, along the Highway 93. The soil, as we have heard, is still contaminated with the titanium and plutonium waste, which was not carefully disposed of at the time. But nonetheless, the EPA and the government agencies raided the facility, the Rocky Flat facilities, after a couple of fires that took place in the area. The news of that, it was everywhere. If you go search the YouTube, you will see that. And the facility was shut down. It was a nuclear weapon.
Okay. We do need to limit comments to 2 minutes, please.
Sorry. So the health effects of that is the cancer. At the time, in the late 70s, Colorado was called Cancerado. The city of Wheatridge has records of one of the higher rates of colon cancer among the men, and that's directly attributed to the effects of the plutonium waste and the pollution of the water system. So I urge all the residents to be involved and not let this go by. We need to clean up the site. We need to not let the Rocky Flats site to be ever drilled on. This is not about the oil and gas. This is about the health and longevity of the Coloradans. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be brief, I promise. My name is Sasha Stiles. I'm a resident of Superior. I'm also a physician. I'm also a member of the Physicians for Social Responsibility, which is a national group that's well known for doing work and everything nuclear and everything fracking. I have a copy of the compendium that they have given, which if you read it, I've sent it online, is frightening about the risks of fracking in general. Also, I've been working with many Rocky Flats groups, and I do know that underneath the soil is a lot of contamination. I won't go into that. I will say that Physicians for Social Responsibility is intimately involved in trying to help all of us make sure that our community is safe environmentally, and that I would like to offer this to the board. And I also have some information from PSR, which is on their website, to give to you all if you would like to look at that. Because it's critical that we all do something. I'm not an attorney. We need the attorneys and all that kind of information critically. But we are talking about, the reason we're living here is because it's a healthy place to live. And our health is even more in jeopardy now than it has been. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Herman, been living here about 17 years. Have a couple of comments. Considering that I have a chemical engineering background, I'd like to see samples or see an analysis of their fracking fluids. And I don't know if that's, and I know that becomes contentious with a lot of companies. They sort of claim proprietary formulations and what have you. Too bad. We need to know about the safety aspects of it. I don't know anything about any requirements for equipment checking. In other words, are there any standards that have to be examined that the state has? Any kind of rules, regulations that say your equipment has to be inspected periodically for whatever? I don't know what I need to ask for, but are there any requirements in that regard? And my final comment is, and this is going to be keying off of what Sandy Pennington said earlier, I'm concerned, if any of you remember from the late 60s and early 70s, there was, remember Rocky Flats Arsenal, not Rocky Flats, but the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, where they were doing a lot of deep well drilling And what they did there was they went ahead and they deposited hazardous waste down in those deep wells. And in fact, to the extent that they were actually causing minor earthquakes to occur in the area at the time. There's a professor from mines called Evans who billed himself as Earthquake Evans, and his talk was how Denver got it in the arsenal. But anyway, what I'm suggesting is, are there deep wells that have been drilled at Rocky Flats for storing radioactive waste or hazardous waste of any type? And those wells go deep. Those are the 8,000, 10,000 foot wells. And so when we're talking about running fracking lines horizontally at very deep depths, is there a possibility, and I don't know if they exist or they don't exist, but I think that's something that needs to be examined to just determine, it's just another safety requirement. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leah Rowan, and I'm a resident of Superior. And I just, my question is more, I guess, for you to talk about when you're in your executive meeting, which I understand legally you have to kind of go through certain steps before we can necessarily make everything free and transparent. But are we thinking about it big enough is my question, because I don't know, if somebody wanted to drill under Chernobyl, I think that Europe or Asia would have something to say about it. And we're just talking about Superior. And so I'd be really curious about prevailing winds and other municipalities, other counties. Why isn't this a state level? This is obviously, there's people that just don't want to look at the tanks. But I've lived here, well, I left for a while, but I'm from here. And we used to hold our breath when we drove past Rocky Flats, 30 years ago. So I think that it'd behoove us to think strategically. It's good to play nice with people, and it's also good to get a lot of publicity. And I feel like I have listened to the government tell me when things were safe. My brother, who died of cancer, listened to that on one of the other Superfund sites here. And I just think it's not about what's on the top layer, it's what we don't know. And it's also about getting people angry and getting people to be vocal and having the news visit us. And maybe we need to investigate avenues that are outside the town of Superior. Yes. So, and then let us know what we can do.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I really want to thank the council for getting everybody involved. I worked for a number of years.
Do you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, I'm Brian Lavash. I'm a new resident of Superior. We just moved here in March. I started a family in town. Then we discovered this. You know, I used to call on the oil and gas industry. I've been up in the Bakken Shale, and I've stood on those oil rigs, seen how disorganized they are. You know, I've seen 18-year-olds working 18-hour shifts, 2 hours straight, bleary-eyed, subsisting on Monster energy drinks. Mistakes are made. In fact, this company on their East Denver, I read incident reports where they had 6 unique incidents at one rig site over the course of a year. They had several follow-up inspections where the same issue over and over was not repaired. I would like to say that I believe that this company is over-leveraged financially, and they're going for an economy drilling deal. I'm concerned about mistakes that might be made at our town as well, where our residents could be impacted. I'd also like to suggest the idea that if you can't pursue due process in the United States, this company is based in the UK, their parent company. Perhaps there's a better due process law in the UK where you could pursue things there. So I look forward to us winning this. And I want to also think strategically. My final comment is, once we do win and we push this oil rig out of our town, where are they going to try to set up next? Because we got to think about that too. You know, what if they go to that guy who commented that he was a fan of having it on his land because he wants to make money off of it? You got to think of what happens next too. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good
line's getting shorter, so if you want to.
Hi, my name is Tao He. I've been living in Superior since 2002. So I heard a lot of good comments today and a lot of good ways to try to fight this proposed drilling project. I want to see if there's another angle we can try to go for with this. Because one of the things we heard is the 31 wells. But one thing I did read seemed to be that these wells are going to produce only a maximum of 15 barrels per day. So I looked up, it sounds like the definition for it calls stripper wells, which are typically for wells that's being production, in high production initially, but over years it's being drying up. So now they're producing very low level of oil each day. So then the definition for stripper wells. So there seems to be there's very limited financial advantage for this. For example, I was looking up, I think the Colorado regulation has that for super wells, you don't have to pay state tax for it, as opposed to high production wells where you have to pay state surveillance tax. So, and also the fact it's putting so little, which tells me that the revenue that generated is very little, which means the tax money for the county is also very little. So I want to see if there's a way to say, okay, is for this little benefits, so-called benefits, right? The money for the county or the money for the school district is worth the risk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Hull. We've been living in Superior for a couple of years now, moved over from Louisville. I just had a couple of questions. One, I've heard stuff in this general area, but did we address the risk of the fracking activity causing seismic activity in the area? I know that that has happened in other cases, and it can depend on the geology. Personally, with this bentonite expansive soil, I'm not really thrilled about that prospect. And also, I understand that the whole application process has been a bit of a rush. Is anyone making very sure that all of the paperwork is in order? And if it is not, is there any prospect of delaying the process until we make sure that it is absolutely in order?
I think the short answer, yes. I think the short answer to that is yes, we're absolutely.
My name is Trevor Lavins. I'm a resident of Rock Creek, and I was the vocal guy at the back, unhappy with this whole thing. So I guess my question to your organization is drilling or providing permits for horizontal drilling under a Superfund site the definition of insanity or not? So I've been involved pretty heavily locally with text messages, Facebook. There's a site called Nextdoor, a lot of you guys get focused on, but there's a lot of fractured information out there amongst various different portals. There's a mailing list going around for anybody who gets on email, and then there's a Facebook page called, I think it's called Superior Safe or Safe Superior. It's invite only. I would recommend for people who oppose this to join, get involved, and I think that's a pretty good site, and then also on Nextdoor as well. So for anybody who's not aware of those things, you reach out to many of us in here and we can point you in the right direction, because if we get several hundred people involved and then start to get organized about media appearances, several of us contacted the media today, also can interact with our trustees, also interact in state and local governments. We got 30 days to take some significant action before that hearing, and I think it has to be a multi-pronged approach. Because if this stuff happens in our community, it's going to be devastating for our property values, for the health of our children. There's a school that is less than a mile there that both my kids go to. So we have to do something to stop this, if not delay, and then allow some more of these structural legislative activities to happen to put a stop to this.
Thank you.
Just want to make sure it's clear, Safe Superior is not invite only. If you search for it, you can request to join. So please do that on Facebook.
Hi, my name is Jeff Wingert, 25-year resident of Superior. I've lived on Animas Way, which is within an eye shot of the site for the last 17 years. Since my email I sent to you guys this morning, I've done a lot more digging, looking into the oil and gas website and digging in a little bit deeper. You've touched on a lot of questions tonight that I won't get back into and rehash, but I'll follow up on some of those. So great information. Thanks for putting all this together. One that didn't come up, one of the documents that I found in the documentation for the drilling is the site itself. And this might be a minor point, but it might be one of the straws we can pile on to hopefully break the camel's back here. Is from the southeast to the northwest on the site, they're going to have to cut and fill over 20 feet of grade. So they're going to take that from the southeast side, grade that over. I don't know what kind of jurisdiction the city has over that grading and what you can do to limit that. But the big concern would be some of the concerns that have been brought up by others is that when you take that fill and you push it to the northeast, you're going to be putting 20 feet of fill there right next to McCaslin Boulevard. Very unstable. We've talked about the soils here. What are the impacts there? So I'd ask you to look into that as one more straw that you might be able to use to help battle what we're looking at here. Thanks.
Thank you. If you'd like to make public comment, just make your way over to this side. Go ahead.
Thank you for pulling this together, guys. My name is Mike Martino. I'm a 13-year resident of Superior. Both my children attend El Dorado K through 8. I trust that our elected officials are going to do all the political, or no, not the political, but the financial, legal, and environmental actions that can help us prevent this. But I fear that while we're all getting excited about this right now, that history is not on our side. And we might get all excited and have all kinds of rallies and put all kinds of protesters all over the neighborhood and all over the McCaslin. But again, history is not on our side. So I'd like to encourage our officials here to consider a more powerful, out-of-the-box approach to how we beat this, concurrent with all the legal, environmental, and financial remedies that we're going after. Maybe we need to elevate this to a statewide debate, a national debate. And how do we do that? I don't know. Maybe we recruit some renewable energy companies to partner with us in this fight. Maybe we designate the land as for renewable energy when you take that 6-month hiatus to figure out how you want to approach this. It might not be legally tenable, but it might have the good optics of a national debate that we might be ground zero for. So I trust you guys. Good luck. Thanks.
Hi there, my name is Eric Kozbal. I've lived here since 2005. I have 3 kids here. My question is pretty simple that I'd like to submit anyways, is where else in the town of Superior nearby can this happen? You know, is this going to be a whack-a-mole sort of thing? What kind of susceptibility do we have? If they don't get it here, are they going to move 100 yards down? So I'd like to know, where else this could happen.
No, that's a good point, and I think whatever we do needs to apply to the whole town so that we're ready for that, should that happen.
And then I'm always in support of buying green space. So.
Thank you.
I will always vote for that.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bharat, and we have been living in Superior for the last 3.5 years, and Superior has been the only city we have lived in the U.S. right from the beginning. So we relocated from India, my wife and I, and we started living in Superior, and we decided to buy our house in Superior for 3 reasons. One, it was voted the best place to live in Colorado, or the second best place to live in Colorado. 2, because of the school district, and 3, our daughter was born here this February. So Superior is really close to us, and El Dorado is the school she's gonna go to. And I really appreciate all the information that has been flowing around today. So my suggestion today would be for you guys to work with CenturyLink I understand the fact that CenturyLink may not own the surface rights or the 8,000 feet underground real estate, but I would really appreciate for you guys to lobby to CenturyLink and get their moral buy-in, right, for supporting us. And if they support us, right, so every one of us, I bet would be switching to CenturyLink, right? Like it can be the CenturyLink town in the United States, right? So I think we have to fight capitalism with capitalism. So CenturyLink, I think, would be a really big ally if we can win over them in this. So that would be my comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steve Yakunis, I'm an 18-year citizen of Superior. Thank you all for your service and your time. I appreciate it. One of the things I want to make sure that we're aware of is that the setbacks for schools are so much. I have a question with that. Does that include outbuildings for schools, such as remote lab sites for the school? Can we build some kind of a platform near this facility that they want to build? And call it an observatory for wildlife, something along those lines. Schedule classes there once a week, once a month, that the kids go up on that hill. And hey, guess what? They get a little exercise as well. I know, I run that hill. I run that hill every week, at least 3 times to 5 times a week. I don't want to lose this. And trust me, we are in a fight. This is the oil and gas companies, and I already saw one news camera go. This news cycle is short, very short, and it's going to be incumbent on you to keep us front and center. We've got to bring every single mayor in the surrounding territory to the table, every single state legislator to the table. This is not a Superior problem. This is a Colorado problem. This is going to be a national problem. You don't believe me? Look at New Jersey. That's where I grew up. I was born in Newark. Look at Elizabeth. Look at Linden. See what happened. That's what oil and gas is going to do. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no one up here. Come on up. If you'd like to make public comment, just make your way over here and go one to the next. Welcome.
Hi, Libby Feltz. I live in Superior. And the only thing that I haven't heard anyone mention so far is the possibility of working with CenturyLink, if it's not possible for Superior to acquire the land, to at least put a conservation easement on it while they retain the ownership of it in order to stop any surface development at all. So that's just one possibility that I haven't heard floated yet.
Thank you for the suggestion. Okay, additional public comment? Any additional public comment? Okay, if you'd like to make public comment, make your way on over so we can go one to the next, and then we'll close out public comment and have final discussion up here at the board. So.
Thank you, trustees, for making sure everyone is being heard tonight. My name is Rob Mullins. I'm a 20-year resident of the town of Superior here, and I just wanted to throw out a couple of quick additional ideas. We're certainly focused on the short term right now, right, and trying to help and move this off and delay it, but something else for us to think about in the longer term are some of the recent ballot issues that have passed in nearby towns related to additional taxes to help dissuade the oil and gas companies from putting in wells. You know, what I'm specifically referring to is the City of Boulder passed ballot issue 2C, which is the imposition of oil and gas pollution taxes, which are substantial financial costs that are associated with those things. It was City of Boulder issue 2C are ones you could refer to. Another one is the City of Lafayette post issue 2A, which is the same thing, oil and gas pollution tax. So while we're looking at the short term and hoping that we can delay this for some period of time so we can do due diligence and get our ducks in a row, that's something in the longer term I think we should also consider. Something else that was probably already noted, but I'd like to bring it up just to make sure, is some of the things in the characterization of in the application that's done is that future land use is characterized as rangeland, which I don't think would be accurate. based on what the town has, has considered that as a target for open space and things like that. So that might be just another technicality that we may want to take a look at and consider in discussions with the Gas Commission, Oil and Gas Commission. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Cindy Lewis. I live on Animas Way. We've been there since 2002. Our children have moved away. We planned on living there and having them move us out. But I'm questioning whether this is the place I want to continue to live or not, if I have to look up that hill at these oil and gas things, and for our health. So the question that I have for you is, I'm going to go home, I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to, over the next 10 days, think, what's happening? What do I need to do? I'll sign up to all these emails and everything, but what I'd like communication back from you as the board is what our expectation is as residents to be informed, because I know you have legal things to discuss and you should keep it quiet, probably, but how do you keep the town comfortable with what's going on? And so if you can communicate that to us, I would appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Mermelstein. I'm a resident of Superior. I happen to work at a mapping software company based in Broomfield, Colorado, of which the town of Superior, the county of Broomfield, Jefferson County, Boulder County are all customers. In doing an analysis of the area, I've noticed that within a 500-foot setback of the proposed site is Boulder County open space. And I'm wondering if there's any jurisdiction for Boulder County to also get involved in this process. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'd welcome any more public comment. If anyone has not had a chance to give public comment and would like to, please go ahead. Anyone else? Okay, we have some follow-up comments, questions from the board to Matt? Okay, Sandy?
I actually, Matt, would you address the pathway? We have one good suggestion from up here from residents. Basically, the most important ones, or the ones that I think we need to act on very quickly, involve CenturyLink. We need that appointment soon, very soon, tomorrow if we can have it. We need to get our elected representatives educated, aware, and on the team. We've got a number of new ones that, for example, Matt Jones as the new BOCO commissioner. We've got a new BOCO commissioner in Jeffco. We've got a new governor. The governor puts into place the oil and gas people. He also will put into place a new Colorado Department of Public Health person. So we've got the elected officials. We've got to coalesce to be on the team. We've got residents that we need to activate. We've got, it was brought up in Kevin's rally yesterday, we've got local stakeholders, all those other companies and apartment complexes and whatnot out there. We heard, BOCO open space. So I throw at you, how are we going to, what strategic plan are we need a strategic plan, obviously, with several accomplishable points in order of priority. So how do you see yourself tackling this?
Well, I think
with your wonderfully large staff.
Right. I think the first thing that the board needs to decide if you want to do is enact the moratorium. That's the first line of action that has to be done. That provides the town an additional 6 months to put in measures in place that we need to put in place to adequately control this process. We need to continue to work with the Oil and Gas Commission and their process, as well as the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and their process. We need to work with Bureau of Land Management, if that's who it's going to be, or Fish and Wildlife on their comments, as well as the Department of Energy. And I think those are the priorities, and then reaching out to the elected officials at the state level or federal level, and the newly to be appointed officials come January, working with them as we get this additional 6 months process. CenturyLink, we've already reached out to them. We would meet with them, and I think meeting with the Highlands Natural Resource Corporation as well and their officials.
Well, I know we can't take official action in a work session, but just speaking for myself, I'd like to direct us to move forward with the moratorium as soon as practical.
I'd also like to ask, is it possible for us to create some task forces of residents to start working on some of these things, particularly given that staff time is limited?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it sounds like they're mobilized already, so it's just a matter of coordinating with the residents.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is really around the coordination piece. We are under such a tight timeline that I'd really like to see this directed by town staff to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, putting out multiple messages, and that we have a coordinated plan.
Yeah.
And Matt, we came up, there's a lot of good ideas that were expressed, whether or not we could somehow accelerate a purchase for open space, whether or not, I love the idea of having some satellite lab up there linked to El Dorado. You know, there's probably 15 interesting ideas that somebody could spend 5 hours on turning over those rocks to figure out if they work. 2 weeks ago, you didn't think you were going to spend any time on this. Now staff's going to be spending hundreds, if not thousands of hours on it.
Yeah.
Whatever resources you need, ask. Whatever resources you need, ask. I do not want to hear, we can't miss a deadline. They're going to have oil and gas, spend a lot of money defeating 112. We don't want to, they're going to throw some money at this. If we need to throw a little bit of money at this, and that means that, a skate park is delayed, that would be, I'll have a bunch of 9-year-olds mad at me, but we can make those priorities. This has to be the priority, and whatever we need to do. let's make it
Understood.
happen.
Yep.
Not suggesting delay the skate park, for the record.
Okay, Neil.
Matt, I just want to make sure that we're coordinating with Jefferson County. I know you reached out to many different counties as you could, but Jefferson County to me is the elephant in the room that we need them in our back pocket. They've lived with, I grew up in Jefferson County. I grew up in Arvada. This thing has been a nightmare for my entire life. With the airport and with the Superfund site, those two things alone, I think Jeffco will be on our side and a huge benefit to the effort.
Agreed, and we have had some conversations with Jefferson County staff on this, and we'll continue those as we go through the process, yeah.
In terms of resources, I came to mind when Kevin spoke. I do think we need to get a top-notch media person on this. Beyond what we've already had on issues, this is of potential national interest. Rocky Flats is of national and international interest. So I would like to see us consider that, spending the money to get top-notch media. And then in the past, we've had a State House lobbyist that we've used for a couple of things. I think the new board needs to give consideration to possibly doing that with a well-articulated strategy about what we want that person to help accomplish in terms of longer-term modifications. I mean, the fact that people are denied due process is so insulting, isn't it? We need to address this from a State House perspective, no doubt.
So, yeah, I'm a resident of Superior, just since March. We just took the word out. We used to have.
Sir, do you mind giving your name, please?
Oh, sorry, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
We used to have news. It's called 9 on Our Side, and what they did was they looked at special interests like this. I mean, something minuscule compared to this, and they took it to another level, right? And that's what we're talking about. You talked about this too, right? Is that we need to take this to a whole other level. We understand the sympathetic vote. We get that. But we need to have people on our side that can actually make a difference. You know, the legislation, things like this. We're talking about things that are carcinogenic, plutonium. We're talking about titanium. We're talking about bednite. All of these things that, regardless of us, it's our children, right, that we're worried about. We don't know what this dust, if you're vibrating it, is going to do. Long-term results about leaching is not in the data in plutonium. It's just not. I've dealt with plutonium before. I know the product. The problem is it was great back in the 70s, but we found out what's caused the cancer side of it, and guess what? It ain't great anymore. At the end of the day, we're talking about people's lives. And if that's what is holding up the process and the money is going to generate people's lives, how dare we? Right? At the end of the day, we have to fight for our lives and our livelihoods of our kids. This is so much bigger than me, than us. And, you know, this really is something that shouldn't even be on the table. This is such a sad event that we're even here. We're talking about a minuscule piece of land and all of the land that's out there in all of Colorado and hell in all of the United States. And we got to worry about a piece of land on top of the hill and all the traffic that goes with it, much less the traffic that could potentially hurt the kids. This is this should be a moot point. And the reason why I say all this is near and dear to my heart. I've got twin 10-year-olds and a 13-year-old that's going over to El Dorado. I don't want to have to worry about all the infrastructure that's involved, all the noise that's involved, the noise pollution, as well as the things that are carcinogenic. I've had cancer. I don't want my kids to have it. So thank you for listening.
Additional comments from the board?
I think the only other thing that I'd like to add is, Matt, as we go forward, if we could make sure we have a clear communication strategy for the citizens, that would be very useful to make sure everyone's informed and is kept up to date on everything that they can be kept up to date on.
Okay. Well, again, appreciate everyone coming out tonight. I want to reiterate what I said in the opening comments. We are unified in our opposition, and I think that's significant because, as we heard tonight, we may be the first municipality to do so, and that's kind of amazing in itself, but we are unified in our opposition to this, and we're going to do everything we can to get to the bottom of this, and we appreciate all of the great ideas and the willingness to help, frankly. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.